Good afternoon, everyone. We are together again for our wonderful Friday afternoon, Erev Shabbat, Parsha Shiur, sponsored by Henry and Lisa Manoucheri. This week, the rabbi will be discussing Parshas B'midbar, Shavuos, and Megillas Rus, a full agenda. The topics will be to be reborn, solving antisemitism, and the Libels, and other identity crises. The month of Iyar classes are sponsored in loving memory of Daniel ben Aryeh Yaakov Halevi, Zichrono Livracha, may his memory be a blessing, and for the merit of a refuah shalema, a complete healing for Daniel ben Chaya Pesya, Yisrael ben Chaya, and Chaya Ruth bas Mecha. May K'lal Yisrael experience true Shalom, and may we all merit to see the complete Geula redemption speedily in our days. This week's classes are also sponsored for the benefit of a refuah shalema for Peril Sasha bas Merel Rivka, Binyamin ben Lily and Lily, Baruch Yehoshua Yisrael ben Sima, and all Chale Yisrael. May we all enjoy a complete healing, both physically and spiritually. And let's learn with the focus to help bring that about with Hashem's mercy. Without further ado, Rabbi Akiva Zweig, Rosh Yeshiva at the Talmudic University, will begin our shir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Shalom Uvracha. We are in exciting times, beginning Sefer B'midbar, and about to celebrate this coming week, the holiday of Shavuos. Great to be with everyone. As we all know, the really exciting part of this get-together in class is the commentary and the ensuing conversations. We have so many wonderful and intelligent people with much to share, so please stay tuned to the very end. Seems rather ambitious and somewhat bold to talk about solving anti-Semitism and blood libels. And of course, I'm referencing a horrible article by Christoph this week in the New York Times. And obviously the lies and the not only shading of truth, but actually the blatant distortion of truth that's at hand, and the fact that this is one of our most important concerns in the diaspora, is the way that anti-Semitism and various tropes have become and are currently now becoming normalized. This is obviously a problem, and as we've seen in our last couple of years, how violence has also become acceptable or normalized. Canada in particular is dealing with a lot of issues, but so is the United States of America, and of course, Australia, etc. So to say that we can solve this problem sounds rather audacious and ridiculous. At the same time, I Rabbi Phil just posted that not being aware of this article, and I see Dr. Finkelstein has signed on. I'm sure Dr. Finkelstein is very aware of the Christoph article because he monitors online contagions. He probably knew about it before it was being before it was printed. But
not only did we know about it, but call on me. Call on me when you're done.
No. I would like to call on you now because people need a background for the class to be meaningful. And
okay.
We're very impressed with your black hat today, so please take it away.
So the story is that this guy writes an op-ed for the New York Post, and in it he cites data from a really rotten human rights NGO called Euromed, which it sounds as bad as it is, really. And Euromed basically is making the argument, and the entire op-ed is making the argument, that Israelis are systematically torturing prisoners from Gaza and members of Hamas and innocent people, etc., and doing a list of awful atrocities to these people. And the system in prison is rife with abuses, etc. So it's fun. One of the claims they make from Euromed is, I'm not kidding, that Israeli soldiers have trained German shepherds to rape prisoners, which is the craziest thing you could ever imagine. It's not even clear that you could train an animal to do that, right? So they have this claim from Euromed, which is not prestigious. And the New York Times simply puts it in. The editorial team says, no, this is a deep research project. The research is so filled with lying liars, like people who have no credibility. Like this guy Fryam, he like it. One of the Israeli journalists they cite is like, he's on the record for like harming children. I think he's convicted for this. So these are really nasty people they've got in the New York Times article. So we did a deep dive on where this myth about dog rape comes from. And we did an analysis within 24 hours trying to understand the origin of the narrative. And what we discovered was that the story is about 2 years old, and it's true that the first NGO that essentially laundered the myth was Euromed, and that helps because then you have a non-governmental organization that is testifying to the validity of the narrative. But we went deeper. We want to understand where did it come from before that. So we traced this all the way back. And what we realized was that it comes from an Al Jazeera radio program. And the person that invented the mythology, Patient Zero, was the director of the Gaza Health Ministry, which is run by Hamas. So what the New York Times appears to have done is launder direct Hamas propaganda without attribution. They've done this in order to create a blood libel, which they've gotten fantastic readership for. Everybody should be suing them right now. This is insane.
Super helpful. Thank you, Dr. Finkelstein. Rabbi Chil, you feel like you're up to speed? Where you can really only get the latest breaking news with true investigative journalism, you need to sign on to the podcast.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so I know it sounds rather ambitious and like far-reaching to say that we can solve this problem, because after all, we're suffering it from thousands of years. Plus, it seems that the Torah knows that it's going to happen. So, what do I mean by solving it? I will explain. Let's do something really interesting by just moving our attention to the book of Ruth, because this coming week is Shavuos, and of course, next Friday will be the first day of Shavuos, so we will not be meeting and having our class. But I thought that today, in advance of that, we should do at least some important analysis of Sefer Rus, which is really an incredible Megillah on so many levels. So the story of Ruth is one of a woman who converts to Judaism, and because she was married to her husband named Machlon Kilion, what happened was that when they died and there were no ancestors, no heirs to their property, eventually Ruth moves with her mother-in-law to the land of Israel, and it becomes clear that she's looking for someone to reestablish her husband's legacy, both in terms of taking over the properties and in terms of having a child for the honor of her dead husband. And Boaz, who is a leader of the Jewish people at the time, eventually takes the responsibility upon himself, and he does marry her, and he has a child with her, and that child is ultimately the ancestor of King David. That's the way the story concludes. And one of the big questions always on the story of Rus is, what does this have to do with the actual holiday of Shavuos that the rabbi saw fit, that this should be the holiday that we should read it? Because after all, the holiday of Shavuos either celebrates the count that we did from the second day of Pesach until the holiday of Shavuos, and related to that are the offerings of first the second day of Pesach, and then the one that we bring on Shavuos, which are 2 loaves of bread made of actual chametz, and it marks the beginning of the new grains being allowed to be used in the offerings of the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple. So it's either that, or it's the receiving of the Torah, which is less explicit in the Torah, but certainly a major theme, because the rabbis established that in our prayers to say that Shavuos is the time of the giving of our Torah. Either one of those two themes seem to have nothing to do with a convert to Judaism trying to establish the legacy of her dead husband and carry on his name by virtue of someone being responsible for the properties, the real estate, as well as to produce children for his sake. And even the fact that this is a momentous story and it's ultimately the origin story of King David doesn't seem to explain to us what it has to do with the holiday of Shavuos. And there are many who attempt to answer this question with what I would call connections, but it doesn't really speak to the essence of the story. So, for example, there are those that say, look, this story is largely, the story of Ruth is largely surrounding the harvest season, And the fact that Ruth is involved in gathering grains for herself and for her mother-in-law, who they both have been impoverished. So she went around collecting. And that time, in terms of the calendar, is the time of the harvest season, which is the period leading up to Shavuos. That's one connection, people say. Or they say that, look, King David died on Shavuos, and she is the ancestress of King David. So that's a second connection. But that's not the heart of the story. The heart of the story is this incredible woman of conversion, Rus, the greatness of her mother-in-law Naomi, and apparently the fact that she was able to bring her along, the fact that then through their machinations they understood that it would be important to marry into the family of the dead husband, Naomi's relatives, her husband's relatives, and Naomi's also dead husband's relatives, and the fact that they carry it forward. That's the heart of the story. What does that have to do with Shavuos? That's the question. So that's one overall big theme that I want to discuss. A second one is that there's a very bizarre, risque, and seemingly highly inappropriate facet to this story, which is explicit in the sentences. And I mean, it is straight up, straightforward. Because when Naomi conceives of the idea that her daughter-in-law, Ruth, should figure out how to get married to Boaz, she says to her, look, Ruth, you need to take a bath. You need to anoint yourself, be all in, in the 50s, I think they would call this getting all dolled up. And you need to go in the middle of the night. And you need to lie by his feet in the middle of the night, when nobody else is around. You know what I mean? You guys know what I mean? And let's see what happens, because he's sure to do the right thing. Are you kidding me? Really? That seems insane. If this is a good idea, and these are all dignified, respectable people, which we seriously, yichud, being in privacy, would seem to be an issue for sure. Even though, again, she's not a married woman, so it's a lesser issue, and it's actually prior to the takana of non-married women.
It was before the Issa of Yuchad.
Exactly. That's what I just said. Who said that, by the way?
Their buddy.
Oh, Rebutal. Gavaldik. Yes. It was before that, because that was actually with King David's son, that Isser Yichud, before the Isser of Yichud with unmarried women. Anyways, so either way, Rebutal, I think in your terminology, we say, Machashidach, right? Hey guys, let's do the shotgun thing, right? Here's this woman that's impoverished, and she seems very righteous. And Boaz, you've gotten to know her because she's been collecting in your fields in a very modest fashion, and you've obviously been impressed with her. And it would be such a kindness to your dead relatives, Elimelech and Machlon. It would be such a wonderful thing, over schnapps and coffee, and a little l'chaim and some kichel. That would seem to make a lot of sense. But to send her literally in the middle of the night, in secret, to the point where even Boaz, according to the Megillah, and I mean straightforward, becomes aroused, and he has to control himself. And the Gemara brings out, about his willpower and what a tzaddik, righteous person he is. And in the middle of the night, he, carefully sends her back so that she's returning clandestinely to her mother-in-law, so that people shouldn't think inappropriate things. This is just beyond bizarre. Why in the world is this the way to accomplish what seems to be a really, really huge mitzvah that we're celebrating for thousands of years as a major act of kindness on the part of Rus, on responsibility and kindness on the part of Boaz, and like kind of an incredible idea on the part of Naomi. And this is what produces King David, who will produce Mashiach. And you can't seemingly teach this to your children. Right? Even though we do, but this is very strange. So by the way, I worked on this question for many hours last year, Shavuos, and at the end of the night, we had an epiphany that's what I'm going to share with you today. And before we conclude with a hopefully good answer, a possibly good answer. I would like to draw our attention to the Parsha, to one very specific phrase in the Parsha, which on the face of it, in terms of a literal translation, is beyond difficult. I'm sure Rabbi Yechiel is going to agree with me because he loves to go back to the Pashut Pshat and the Psukim, and here we go. The beginning of Parshas B'midbar tells us of a command to count all the Jewish people. And this past Wednesday, we spoke about what exactly is the form of counting that's taking place here. And the idea that we mentioned there will dovetail very well with what we're discussing today. But here in sentence 17, it says that Moshe and Aaron took the men with them that were specified to be the ones to count all the Jewish people. And in sentence 18, right at chapter 1, sentence 18, in our Parsha, the Torah tells us they gathered the whole congregation on the first of the second month, Vayis yaldu al mishpechosam leveis avosam. And they were something which is very hard to translate, according to the families and according to the houses of their fathers. So the word Vayis yaldu, the shoresh, the root of that word is yoled, yeled, child, give birth, or be born. That's the root. So let's just remind ourselves. There's a commandment that Moshe and the leaders, Moshe and Aaron and the 12 leaders of the tribes are supposed to count all the Jewish people. And it says that they gathered all these people on the first of the second month, and this is now the literal translation of Vayisal Bil Mishpachosam, and they were born according to their families, according to the house of their fathers. They were born, Vayisal Du means, and they were born according to their families, according to the house of their families. That just doesn't translate because they were not born then. They're counting 20-year-olds. They've been alive for 20 years and up. So it's a minimum they've been alive for 20 years. And now we're saying that they were born according to their families, according to the house of their fathers. Now, everybody, and I mean everybody, the Onkelos and Rashi and anybody says, well, obviously it doesn't mean they were born. You know what it means? It means that they established yichus, pedigree. The word Vayisaldu does not mean they were born. It's just a way of saying that they brought documents and witnesses, according to Rashi, as to the truth of their ancestry. So either that means that the witnesses testified to the marriage, or that they were living together, or some version of testimony, plus actual papers, documents, as to what their ancestry was, going back to their tribal ancestors, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, etc. So it does not mean that they were born. So a very important question that everybody should always hopefully apply, that my father has taught all of us, is that the Torah could easily say what it means to say. It does not need to say what it does not mean to say. So why wouldn't the Torah just say what it's trying to say instead of saying what it does not mean to say? The Torah could have easily devised a terminology that would mean they brought their lineage, instead of saying, and they were born according to their families, according to the tribes of the house of their fathers. So that is the question. And Rabbi Yechiel is asking a corollary question: did they really have documents of pedigree in Egypt? Where did these documents come from? Yes, papyrus was apparently, in good supply, but we don't know. Anyways, that's a fair question too. So why does the Torah say that they were born? It refers to establishing their lineage. And as we asked on Wednesday, in every other counting of the Torah, this was not necessary for them to show up with witnesses and documents of pedigree. So, and they were counted before this, by the way, according to the rabbis. They were counted earlier, right? So why here? Why now, right? So here's my suggestion. Oh, Rabbi Yechiel's question is, why would they take out paperwork if they didn't take out food? Okay, I'm saying all related. So my suggested answer is like this. As we mentioned on Wednesday, what's happening here, post Har Sinai, post an establishment of a tabernacle, is not so much a number, a calculation as to the number of Jews and even which tribe they follow, but rather as to the purpose of each Jew and to their mission. And because the Jewish people are now the chosen nation of Hashem, given the technology of the Torah, which is way, way more relevant than even us today, even on this class, understand about how critical Torah knowledge is for the development of the world. In fact, Dr. Finkelstein put me in touch with somebody recently that's working on training AI in how the Talmud thinks so that AI can learn to think better. Correct, Dr. Finkelstein? Yes. Right? We don't even get it yet, and that all needs to be worked out. But the point is, when you have a Jewish people that has that technology that I'm calling the Torah, and they're now about to travel into the desert and into the land of Israel to establish the kingdom of Hashem, they all need to know their mission. Very good. Here's a critical thing to know if you want to know your mission. You need to know from where you come, who your families are, who your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents were, and who your tribe was, in order to know who you are. If you don't know that, you don't know your mission. And if you do know that, you can finally legitimately claim your heritage. And you can actually be born. And the problem with many, many, many people today is, I'm talking about Jews, is that they have no idea even who their ancestors were. I'm not only talking about who their grandparents were. I'm talking about Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. I'm talking about the 12 tribes. Many Jews have no real clue as to who these people are. And what the Torah is telling us here is that if the Jewish people are going on a mission to fulfill that which Hashem said at Mount Sinai, you will be for me a kingdom of Kohanim and a holy people, they must absorb into their psychology their pedigree. So Rabbi Yechiel, whether or not they brought out documents of lineage, they need to make them. They need to write them now because they need to know who they are. And their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, they all need to know who they are in order to know what their mission is. But it's not only in order to know what their mission is, it's in order to have the dignity and the strength to carry it out. The concept of bringing witnesses and establishing pedigree at this time is to give everyone literally the fortitude and the strength to say, I represent Hashem in this world. I have a unique way of fulfilling that representation of Hashem, whether it's through the chesed that I do, whether it's through the Torah that I learn and teach, or it's through the ways that I connect my fellow Jews to Hashem or other people to Hashem, whatever specific way that I go about doing that. And yes, different tribes have different qualities and different attributes that would facilitate various kinds of meaningful work as ambassadors to Hashem. I need to have the thorough conviction that I am the man for that job. And this is something that the Jewish people are desperately lacking today. Desperately. We don't understand our own importance, and I don't say that in any kind of an egocentric way. I say it in terms of the contributions that we can and need to make, and the difference that we can and need to make in the world. That's our mission as given to us when we received the Torah on Mount Sinai and ratified and formalized when we were getting ready to travel away from Mount Sinai, when the Torah says in our Parsha, count every Jew by name, according to their families, according to their ancestry, according to their tribes. And every Jew needed to know their name and their ancestry, according to the lineage that goes in ascension back to the tribes and ultimately back to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So that's step one. And when you do know that, you can literally say you are reborn because now you know who you are and what your mission is. And so therefore the Torah is not saying bring documents of pedigree. The Torah is saying get alive, get born. You have a mission. Get into the living and now fulfill who you are. That's why the Torah says they were born according to their families, because understanding it and establishing it and internalizing it is like a rebirth. So, the story of Ruth is about one thing. Ruth's conviction that the Jewish people are the most important people in the world, and her privilege is to establish her dead husband's legacy and his rightful place among the Jewish people. That's what the story is about. And she never for a moment wavers on the critical importance, both of being connected to the long-term future of the Jewish people. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you die, I will die. Wherever you'll be buried, I'll be buried. And the mission of her family, her dead husband, his brother, her father-in-law, Elimelech, she never wavered from that focus, period. Naomi and Ruth are sending one very clear message to Boaz. We're not interested in the marriage. We're interested in having a child for the sake of our dead son or husband. The marriage is not what it's about. It's not about marriage. It's about producing a child. That's the only thing. Now, of course, if you want to make my reputation good and you want me to, make an honest woman out of me, of course, I'll marry you. But if all you want is to not have association with me because I'm a convert and because of my own, non-Jewish ancestry, or because of any other reason that people are not going to accept that a person like you should marry a person like me, whatever the reason is, I don't care. A child. Now, I need the opportunity. That's what Naomi and Ruth are saying to Boaz by doing it this way. Because any other way, and I'm going to explain this even more in a second, any other way could, God forbid, be misconstrued as not having the right intention, which would not, in this particular facet of mitzvos, and by that I mean relations, what you're thinking at the time is very important in terms of who you produce as the child. And what has to be crystal clear is that this is not about what a good woman Ruth is, or what a good man Boaz is. And wouldn't it be nice if later in life Boaz could have some companionship and Ruth could finally, have some security? Because that very easily could be good and noble intentions, but it would do nothing for the dead husband and the legacy of Elimelech and their rightful place in the tribe of Yehuda, which is ultimately, guess what? To produce King David, King Shlomo, and the Mashiach. That's not exactly small potatoes. And so what Boaz and Naomi and Ruth ultimately collaborate on is the truth of their mission. It's why the rabbis even tell us that he did marry Ruth, they did cohabit, and then he died the next day. He died. Because it was never about the marriage. It was about the act of cohabitation that ultimately could lead to a child. Now, one of the very interesting things that this story correlates to is the mitzvah of Yibum. Yibum is that when two brothers are alive, one of them is married and dies and has no children, the surviving brother has a mitzvah to marry the widow, the woman, and establish a legacy for the dead brother. That's called Yibum, and in English we call it a levirate marriage. Now it happens to be that Yibum is the only form of marriage that we have in the Torah that does not require the woman's consent. It could even be done against her will, and it would be a marriage. And it does not require witnesses. It's just done. And the only way to perform it is through relations. There is no other way to do the mitzvah of Yibum. So to marry the woman with a ring is not a fulfillment of the brother's commandment to marry his sister-in-law who had no children with his dead brother. The only way to do it is literally as an act of relations. That's literally the mitzvah. And that's what Boaz and Ruth are establishing. So therefore, there's no question that a better way to do it is through marriage. There's no question. But what Naomi and Ruth are doing is making it clear that if the only way to do it is not through marriage, they're also willing for that. There's no question that, and because we could even ask it about the mitzvah of Yibum at all. Why do the mitzvah of Yibum? Why get married to the woman at all? Why does it have to effectuate marriage? No question that in in almost every case, a long-term relationship is much better than a short-term relationship. But the rub, the difficulty is that a long-term relationship can always be about the relationship and not about the legacy of the dead person, which is why the rabbis in the Talmud decreed that we no longer do yibum, because we're concerned that the intentions of the brother-in-law and sister-in-law are not the purest and what they need to be. That's how tricky the mitzvah is. So to do this mitzvah correctly, you have to do it with the Naomi and Rus mindset. Yes, then you get married. But the only way to do it correctly is with the mindset that the relationship is secondary or tertiary, whatever word you want to use, because the main thing is to produce children and a legacy for the man who has passed. And so therefore, the story of Rus is really the story about the almost desperate, but certainly tenacious commitment to establishing the legacy of a Jew. Literally to give him a name, a legacy. And what we've forgotten as Jews is our own identity, our own legacy, and all the more so, every single other Jews. We do not have nearly enough care and sensitivity and commitment to making sure that every Jew fulfills their destiny. The story of Rus is about making sure that the Jews fulfill their destiny because they're on a mission from Hashem. And ultimately, it's the king's job to make sure that every Jew fulfills their mission, empowering every Jew in Hashem's kingdom to be and fulfill the mission that was given to them by Hashem, which is why the word melech, which is king, backwards is the word kulam, all of them, which is why King David is still the most quoted person of history, and why we say that King David represents the emotions, the thoughts, and the feelings of every Jew. He has that global perspective and sensitivity of the mindset and motivations and perspectives of every other Jew. And so it's no coincidence that Rus and Boaz are his ancestors, because they're committed, specifically in this case, the Machlon Chilin Elimelech, but that's really what a king is supposed to do. It also explains why it was so tragic that Elimelech left originally, because he did not want to bolster the spirits and provide for the needs of every Jew that needed him at the time of great famine in the land of Israel. That's why it was so tragic, because he was most gifted and should have been the one to stand up and make sure that every Jew is accounted for. So the reason all of this is being done on the holiday of Shavuos is because it's easy to think of the holiday of Shavuos as a Jewish holiday, as a time when we receive the Torah, and when we have the mitzvahs of the Torah, and we have to fulfill the requirements of the Torah, and it's all about the Jews. It's not all about the Jews. It's about Hashem's kingdom and every Jew's mission in that kingdom, which is definitely also about the Jews, but it's a global mission. And every Jew fulfilling their role is absolutely essential, and it's something that not only that each Jew themselves needs to be concerned about, but every Jew needs to be concerned about every other Jew. So I suggest, and of course, there has been thinking, Brett Stevens in that last speech that he gave, also a columnist from the New York Times, wrote about, is that the solution to anti-Semitism is less about fighting the anti-Semitism, but it's about Jews being Jews. And I know Dr. Finkelstein is of that mindset as well, but I want to explain it a little bit. When we engage in the nonsense of, oh, the IDF also does atrocities, it's a non-starter. We should not even have that conversation. I'm sorry, I don't talk to morons. That's the answer. Not an article defending, just an article of the atrocities of October 7th. Sure, that makes a lot of sense. And Israel just came out with 10,000 pictures and 3,000 pages. Sure, that makes sense. Or explaining how the IDF makes a decision and always warns the people to get out of Dodge, before they bomb, etc. That makes sense. There's lots of things that make sense. But engaging with morons, by definition, is a lose. not only is it a lose, it doesn't represent what Jews are all about. Jews should be able to say with confidence that we don't do things that are atrociously immoral, and therefore I'm not even going to bother defending it. Now, the problem is that not all Jews think that about Jews. That's a big problem. And tragically, we have some bad Jews very badly misrepresenting us. Okay, fine. We have to say, yes, those Jews don't represent us, and there's just nothing to even discuss because their significance in terms of population size is just irrelevant. So we're not going to solve the fact that there are people that are out to get us, because the people that are out to get us do not want the kingdom of Hashem and the way that the Jews know that the kingdom of Hashem needs to get established. They don't want that outcome. So therefore, they're just going to keep inventing ways to both kill us physically and to discredit us in the eyes of the world. They're just going to keep doing that because at the end of the day, it has nothing to do with us, and it has everything to do with the power and the control that they want. We're just in the way. We have to understand that. If we really understood our lineage, if we really comported ourselves with our sense of dignity and mission, but more importantly, if we would really fulfill our potential in pursuit of that mission, the world would be such an infinitely better place. In order to get there, we have to know our own pedigree, and we have to be very concerned that every Jew knows that and buys into that, just like Ruth did. Now, it's an amazing gift that we have people that are converts or even sometimes non-Jews that do appreciate what Jews have to offer, and they can do for us what tragically we're not always doing for ourselves. That's the story of Ruth. She was a convert. She did it for us in a way that seemingly Boaz and Ploni Almoni and all the other characters in the story would not have done without a Rus. Right? Imagine that Naomi comes back to Israel with no Rus in tow. There's nothing to talk about. There's no story. That's only because of Rus's choice. It's an amazing fact. And we have to be so appreciative that there are people like that. And thank Hashem for that. And we also have to learn the lesson from that. And so solving the blood libels and solving the anti-Semitism is much more about solving Jewish identity. And solving Jewish identity is all about God gave us the Torah, we have the mission, we have the technology of how to fulfill that mission in the wisdom of the Torah and in the people that are the descendants of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And we can make Hashem's kingdom clear to the world if we will just stay on mission. If instead of fighting to remember never again or the Holocaust, or instead of fighting to, sue the people, who are making these things, we just either be the Jews that we are and figure out how to oust them or get rid of them, or not worry about them, and we'll have so many Jews that the good will just overwhelm the bad. However we get there, that has to be the way to do it. Now, of course, what's very, very, very important, and not enough is spoken about this, but again, both Dan Sinor and Brett Stevens spoke about Jewish education and Jewish living. I can tell you firsthand, Jewish education is desperate for money. Desperate. You can decide which Jewish education you want to support, but if you want Jews to understand what it means to be Jews, you need to be supporting those Jews that are trying to help the Jews to understand what it means to be Jews, or go and do it yourself. Questions or comments? Yes, Rabbi Chiel.
Well, you could, Gewaldig, you could prove your point that it's universal by virtue of the lineage of Rus. You're coming from the daughters of Lot. The daughters of Lot. What was their concern? Their concern was about the universe being that there's nobody in the world that's going to live with us. That means everybody's dead. We have to recreate the world.
Excellent
Number
point.
one, and you see Tamar's not a Jew, and yet Tamar understands that she has two dead husbands that she has to create a legacy for.
Yes, excellent.
At the cost of perhaps death.
What was the last thing? As what?
At the cost of being killed.
Oh yeah, at the risk of that, for sure. Yeah,
risk of that, and then you have, then of course you have, like I said, I think it was last year we mentioned it. you see Boaz as well. Boaz says, if you don't, there's somebody before me. If Ploni Almoni agrees to get married to you, that's wonderful.
Yes, absolutely. Shkoyach.
I see Reb Yiddle has a comment as well.
Hi. First of all, just want to say you were talking about Vayaldi. They were born. The reason it says that they say this it's a story with Lot, with his daughters. If any religion will ever come that God had a kid with somebody, you say it's always with a man with a woman. If you realize every time they're talking about yichus, it tells you they were born by man and woman. So anybody will come and tell you differently, you can't deny that. That's one of the reasons it says the word born when it comes to this to give us telling what?
You're saying it came through a male and a female.
So they're trying to say that that's not me. I think Moshe Feinstein speaks about this. That's the reason they said Lot's daughter is the story. Why do we have to know the story? What happened in the cave? To say, hey, listen, nobody would have had a kid, even with a father, but it has to be a man and a woman. And that's why it always says the word Vayaldi. If you realize the end of the Rus, the same thing. They were born. Why is it?
Yeah.
What born? How they were born? The story with the man and a woman. It always comes back to the man and the woman. So the religion that comes. The second thing is a very interesting concept. What you said. If you don't want to get chalitza, and chalitza is one of the most biggest ceremonies with itis and have to be with a bezin, and to shame the guy who didn't want to do it. It's the opposite. Yeah. It's so funny that I just realized when you were saying that that's
very good point.
It's only beer. The other way,
you're right. So Rabbi Yiddle is saying is that it's a big mitzvah to do it the right way, and it's actually very frowned upon, and it's degrading to not do it, which is very unusual for the Torah to do something like that.
You have to take off the shoes. You have to spit. I mean, if you think about it, it's mind-boggling how you think it's different.
Yes.
It's almost like it's the responsibility of the community to pressure the person to do the right thing.
Nice.
Speaking of the right thing, I'd also like to congratulate Reb Yiddle on his correct pronunciation of all the words with the appropriate Hungarian inflection. Anyway, we have Joseph Vital next. Please go ahead.
I like very much that you tied down made the connection between the identity of the Jews. It's not so important for identity's sake, but it's related to the mission. So the connection between identity and mission, it's crucial because it's for a goal. We are all working towards a goal. So I was wondering if you can talk a little bit more about how on a practical level today, how to connect our identity with our mission. Right? So we all want to know why are we here for? So general picture, but from more specific, if you can give us some guide.
Yes, I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to turn the floor over to. Jessica also has a question. Okay, so let me do that. It's going to take a minute or two, but I'd love to hear from Jessica and then Dr. Finkelstein, if you're available to share more. That would be great. So I'm giving a class on in Surfside this coming Tuesday night. We're going to go more into detail on some of what I'm mentioning now, and I mentioned some before. And so here's the one important thing. The rabbis tell us very clearly that as much free choice as we have no choice as to when we are born, to whom we are born, and all of our physical and spiritual attributes. We have no free choice on any of that. God just gave that to us. That includes our positives and our negatives, right? Our deficiencies and our proficiencies. Which means that we are meant to live in the time and in the ecosystem in which we live. Now, if we only wake up later in life to even ask this question, so it's whatever environment we are, whatever age we are. And our job to figure out our mission is to figure out what is the maximum good that I can give to the people that are closest to me and to the world. That becomes the most important question, because obviously, just like God created the world in order to give, he created us to be in his image to also give. Now, there's many things that go into that. In order for me to be a good giver, I have to be a developed person. I have to figure out what I can give or how to get so I can give. So sometimes that's knowledge, sometimes that's assets, right? So there's different things that it could be. So point number one is that you have to start wherever you're at and recognize that your gifts and your ecosystem are your starting point. And it should be in service of what's the maximum that I can contribute while also becoming the maximum that I can be in order to contribute more. So far, so good? The second thing that is a very good starting point is what are my natural interests and desires and passions? Because that's part of the makeup that God gave me. Now, you could say some of it might be environmental and, what I learned, nature and nurture. That's true. But nonetheless, as long as your intentions to the best of your knowledge are for the good, you should start with that. And you should literally sit down and make a list, like what would I love to be able to accomplish in terms of my contribution if I could. And you make that list. And again, you have to think about many things. That's step number 2. Okay? So it's going to be dependent on the person. Step number 3 is you should ask yourself, what does my Jewish community or the people that are my Jewish community need the most right now? You should have that as a really serious self-conversation. And then you say, based on what they need the most, where can I serve the most? Because guess what? God is in a full alignment and attunement with what his children need for all the reasons that we've mentioned. So then ask yourself, my Jewish community, whatever that means in my life, what do they need the most that I understand? You go through that whole process, and then you talk to at least 2 very trusted friends about your process, about their insights, and your thoughts on it, and you go from there. That's the nutshell version. Does that sound like it makes sense, Joseph?
Thank you, Rabbi. That's awesome.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, excellent.
I think Jessica Rosenberg had a comment.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
I just want to make sure that I understand. So, I mean, the last part that you mentioned also was a lot in the sense that it's very hard to think about how can we serve the community when a lot of us are trying to serve just our families. If that makes any sense.
That is the starting point.
Right, that would be the starting point.
That's why I said the people closest to us and then the larger community.
I hear you. So just to sum up a little bit more about Ruth and to understand, it sounds like even though that because she was a convert, she's pretty much in a way she's inheriting. It's not just that she is continuing the legacy, but she's also inheriting pretty much what would have been the husband's ancestors. Does that make sense? Is that kind of how you?
No,
Okay.
that's true, and that's
Okay.
another very, very complex part of the story.
Right, because that, and I think that that's more of like my question is, how do you understand that? Because first of all, that's a big.
I might talk about it Wednesday.
Oh, okay, another cliffhanger. Okay.
I might talk about it Wednesday. Yeah.
Okay, so if you can bring that
It's another
up.
major question. It's another major question.
Yeah, because I want to know about that. But okay, any book that you would recommend, other than obviously the safer part about Ruth, but I mean.
I don't know offhand.
Okay. So I'll see you Wednesday. That's all. Thank you.
Good. Okay.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.
I think Joel was going to make some comments here, Rabbi. Is that correct?
If he's up for it, great.
I really didn't have anything planned. I'm just really chewing over sort of what the rabbi said about being, this was a mind-blowing lesson. So I'm sort of like chewing over all the yeah. I will say this, that it's interesting because there, and you have these kinds of recycled narratives where you have a kind of repetition instinct. And you guys talked about the parallels between Tamar and Yehuda, and of course between and the daughters of Lot. And it's interesting to notice, I think I said this before, but it's interesting to notice that in the progression, you go from complete deceit and mindlessness with the daughters of Lot, You have like nefarious purposes that conspire kind of instinctually to continue lineages against anyone's consent or desire. Right? There's the women have a kind of noble idea, but they're so delusional in terms of, let's get dad drunk. He doesn't even have to know about it. And you have this kind of this feminine heroism of taking control of the situation in order to sort of ensure outcomes.
Yeah.
But it's really ruthless, no pun intended. Oh my gosh, what a great pun!
Nice.
What a great pun! That really did not mean for that to come out, but it is ruthless.
That is where it comes from.
Wait, are you serious?
Yeah, ruthless comes from not having the compassion of Ruth.
Oh my God, who knew?
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, who knew? So what's really interesting is that in the next sequence, you still have deception, right? You still have a little bit of ruthlessness, because Tamar literally has to deceive Yehuda in order to achieve the goal. And so Yehuda's none the wiser, which is like, and all of this is actually a rehash, a little bit of Gan Eden, right? It's a little bit of like, the woman is like the ultimate deceiver and the man is someone's idiot, etc. And by the end, what's really interesting is like, it's like you're role playing that same thing. And also throughout a lot of kind of incestuous, like maybe the woman has some daddy issues. But it's interesting. By the end, it's interesting because you're working out those issues, because now it's complete consent. Everything's transparent. He's agreeing to it. He's not being lied to. It's true that he's being seduced, but he's not. But what's on offer is extraordinarily clear. Could not be clearer what is being indicated here, and it's being indicated in, again, no pun intended, in a naked way, and in ways that allow for both parties to engage in full consent. And that means our hands are really on the wheel. So we're really, the woman is sort of like not deceiving anybody. The man actually knows what's going on, and like both of them are in on the joke. Both of them are full partners in the process of procuring a legacy. And then and that becomes, and so like the fact that everyone's all in on it means that we're all responsible for it. And we're all determined to do it, and that kind of transparent determination and focus is what the law is. It's a lawful way of living. That's a determined way of life. So that's why it's related to Matan Torah, because Matan Torah is the ultimate legacy. It's the ultimate thing that endures forever. And it's the best thing. So Ruth shows us that it's like worth it. Not only is it worth it, God, can I get some? What can I do to make sure this is what I'm doing? And that a non-Jew should do that tells us everything about our Creator, right? It tells us everything about our Creator that a non-Jew should see that, right? So I think that's kind of like the sort of thought process I have. It's very unstructured, very, very unstructured. It's all kind of like really, So thank you.
Excellent points. Thank you. Really excellent.
The Sofa says it's very mind-boggling to understand that between Lot, the story with Tamar, how this whole thing with Mashiach comes. So some Sofa writes that it has to be so hidden because it would have never been able to happen. It said it's so much fighting against it with so much. You see it, if you realize what we're going through today, how they're fighting us with full-fledged, that it shouldn't happen.
Very interesting. And Yehuda, you want to take us home?
Yeah. It's very interesting because we were talking earlier about acknowledging who we are and our yihus and who we're born to. And the problem today with Jews is that any small thing will make people ashamed or want to deny their Jewish roots or their traditions or even their connection to their own family. And it's over such trivial and inaccurate things. Whereas if we look at our history, we did all kinds of things to survive. And at the end of the day, the real heroes of our nation always carried that forward, understood the desperate things that had to be done, the difficult things that had to be done. And instead of denying them or demeaning them, we accept them as the necessity of us being here and carrying forward in history to survive. So you might say, oh, Lot, look what happened with Lot. It's terrible. It's deception. Oh, look what happened here. It's she was a floozy. Her mother-in-law made her do these things. But at the end, we have to be proud of all of these things because without them, we wouldn't be here today. And we have to do what is necessary today going forward without shame and without denying our parents, our ancestors, or our teachers, because Hashem has something in mind for us.
Yes. Shar kochacha. Very much appreciated.
Thank
You're
you.
right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great Shabbos, everyone.
Shabbos.
Shabbos. Shabbos.
Shabbos,
Shalom.
Shesher Kochen.